Hello, everyone, and welcome to the tavern. Dapper Bard here to talk about Daredevil Born Again episodes 1 and 2 because they premiered together. So I'm just going to do one video rather than doing two videos and giving myself more watch hours. And I should have made this two videos. More importantly, happy Ash Wednesday, assuming this video comes out on Ash Wednesday like I originally planned. Now, for those who didn't watch my free talk about the series and about some of my concerns, I'll kind of synopsize that really quick. Disney Plus has not had a good track record with shows, and the treatment of Daredevil and Kingpin has been less than stellar. So because of that, I was very worried. Then you got all those behind the scenes stories that were coming out, such as the fact that they were going to have like the gold outfit, it was going to have more of a comedic tone, it was less focus on action. Stuff like that makes you a little bit worried with what they're going to do with the series overall. But then we got the stories about the reshoots. And the reshoots obviously have made some changes in the show. It is fairly clear in these first two episodes where you can see where the reshoots occurred. And it has changed the tone overall from what we heard in the rumors. And supposedly about the midway point onward is all new footage. So when we get to that stage, we'll see how the show changes at that point. What we have right now is old footage with some new footage to try to make the show feel more authentic to the previous 3 seasons of Daredevil, rather than feeling like well, that just happened. Oh, what's that guy's problem? Marvel humor type garbage that we've been getting way too much of lately. So, let's break down the first 2 episodes of Daredevil Born Again and see how well they stack up to the original series. I'll try to keep the spoilers to a minimum because there are some major things that I feel would ruin your viewing experience if you knew about them, but some of those events will be influencing the scores I give these episodes at the end of this discussion. So episode 1 begins with a party for a cop who's retiring. We get to see the gang back together, Matt, Foggy, and Karen. It's great. There's an action sequence, but unfortunately, half of it has just smoke everywhere, so you can't really see what's happening. You see some guys get thrown around, and there's a nice little finale of some good head bashing going on. It's fine, but I really do wish we got a more traditional fight sequence. We then move along into the present with Matt Murdock running a law firm with McDuffie, and I guess Cherry's part of their team as well. And they're just discussing various cases they're taking on and what have you. We kind of get to see where Matt is in his life at this point. We learn that he's given up being Daredevil due to some personal stuff that happened. We're just kind of getting back into the flow of what this series is going to go with. Then we go to the Kingpin stuff where he decides to run for mayor. We know this from the trailer, not a spoiler. You don't see much of him on the campaign trail, which I feel could have been really interesting and could have drawn this out for a couple episodes, but they just cut to the meat of it. He becomes the mayor. This episode also has that table sequence from the trailer. It's extended with a few more little pieces of dialogue, which is nice. A really good sequence there between the two characters. There is one moment that kind of made me chuckle, and I don't think it was intended, where Matt Murdock makes a reference to, hey, didn't you get shot in the face? And Kingpin's response is, I did. Now, let's discuss things from our past. He's just like, oh, okay, I guess we're just going to acknowledge, yeah, I got shot in the face. I recovered. What do you want? So anyone who knew about the headshots on Kingpin in the previous show, he got better. It feels like that's like that one acknowledgement of like, yes, I was in some Disney Plus shows, some stuff happened, whatever, moving on. I think they're trying to do their best to make this both a continuation of Netflix with also being a work with the MCU, and it comes off a little odd as the tone and style and a lot of the characters from the Netflix series will probably never show up in the MCU. Overall, this was a good setting things up episode. We got to get to know where the characters are in their lives. We get to set some stakes. Matt Murdock goes on a date, which I get the feeling those romantic comedy elements and some of the banter at the law firm were a big part of the original show. Alongside these little things we cut to with the BB show, where we get man on the street saying random stuff, I feel like that and the character of BB herself were probably bigger parts of the original show as well. And I'll explain that more as I get into episode 2. But episode 1, story-wise, pretty good. A pretty good start. The action sequence really could have been a little bit better. But on the other hand, this does a lot of setup, and it uses its hour of runtime very wisely with trying to make things work in a way that allows it to be its own show, but still acknowledge things came in the past. Then we have episode 2. Episode 2 is 40 minutes, so it's already 20 minutes shorter than the previous episode, and probably the standard length we're going to see for most of the episodes in this show, probably up until the finale or something. Which is kind of normal with Disney Plus shows. They do tend to vary in terms of their length, so seeing something like that isn't like a shock to me. I'm just glad this isn't a half-hour type series. Episode 2 begins with the Kingpin giving his New Year's mayoral speech. We then cut to a subway fight. The guy who was trying to protect someone else gets arrested. And of course, Matt Murdock gets involved in this case. As it turns out, the guy who got arrested is the White Tiger, which we all knew was going to be in the show. So we get to see him on trial when he wasn't even using his powers or his costume. He was just being a good Samaritan and getting punished for it. And we're going to kind of see where that goes. It is nice seeing Matt on a new case, and the A-plot of Matt trying to figure out how to defend someone who everyone else believes is a cop killer works really well for a starting point for the show. In fact, it feels like something that could have been in the first episode instead of the second episode, which just feels like we're doing more setup and not really a lot of payoff just yet. But the little courtroom sequences he has, dealing with the judge, dealing with the prosecutor, seem to be fairly well done. Hopefully we get a few more decent little court moments without it being the primary focus of the show. Just like with the older show, we got some great court scenes, but that wasn't the primary focus. It was the bigger plot, and hopefully we get a bigger plot at some point. Meanwhile, the Kingpin is trying to ingratiate himself to the people of New York by trying to show that he is a man of action, that he will go and make changes and try to make things better. He has to deal with the police commissioner, who obviously knows about Kingpin's past and isn't happy of him being the mayor. And you get some nice little drama there. His super annoying subordinate, Daniel, I think his name's Daniel, he ends up bringing BB over to interview the Kingpin, and it's fine. Because of that sequence, and they talk about like them dating a little bit, I'm like, oh, this was part of the original show. For sure, Daniel and BB had bigger parts. Daniel has that whole I'm a hip cool dude thing going. Not real life hip dude, like TV hip dude. BB obviously is supposed to be some big deal because she's on the internet. I'm on the internet. It's not a big deal. Anyone can do it. It's really easy. Just get a camera. Anyhow, it's an okay building of stuff episode, but again, it would have been nice to see something big happen. Worse yet, there are 2 fights in this episode. Neither is shot well. The subway fight is hard to follow what's happening, and the martial arts isn't particularly well done. I understand that a lot of Daredevil does come down to brawling, but the brawling in the original series was done in a way that felt realistic. It showed some of Matt Murdock's skills, and White Tiger is supposed to be a martial artist. Magical amulet or not, still has some fighting skills, and it's just not shot well. So if the actor or stuntman did a good job, it's hard to tell. Then at the end of the episode, Matt gets a brief brawl going on, and it does feel like those old school Daredevil like brawls. It's very short. It's, again, not shot very well. A lot of shaky cam, a lot of just moving stuff around, and it's hard to see what's happening. But it does have some of that brutality when they actually slow down and focus on something. It's just really shoddy camera work, especially if you're used to the old TV series, which I rewatched a fair chunk of before this show. You can tell the difference. It's pretty big and pretty obvious. But I will say, comparatively to other Disney Plus fight sequences I've seen, it's above average on the Disney Plus scale. As good as that is. Overall, the plot for episode 2 is okay. It's nothing special. It feels like more build-up. And yet, we didn't get like an overarching plot. We just have Kingpin doing mayor stuff, and we got Matt doing lawyer stuff with a little bit of fluff here and there. But not terrible. It's just, kind of want a little more. So now let's move on to the characters. Matt Murdock, you can tell that Charlie Cox went right back into the role fairly well. The character feels like the character. His actions, his motivations, things like that very much fit the character. The personal tragedy being a motivator, his constant infighting on whether or not he should actually be getting involved in the bigger crimes that are happening in the city. Things like that all work really well. He is well written and authentic to the character, and being portrayed authentic to the character. That being said, his portrayal of someone visually impaired changes scene to scene. It's not as bad as Ben Affleck, but it's not as good as it was during the Netflix days. I am hoping that over the course of the show, that'll change, whether it's taking Mr. Cox a little bit of time to get used to playing a visually impaired character again, or if it was something to do with the directing. I don't know. I hope that changes, and if it does, I'll make comment about that in future videos. But otherwise, I think he does a great performance, and it's great seeing him in that role again. If they had replaced him, this show would not have worked. Then we have the Kingpin. Man, is he still intimidating. Even when he's trying to be like, I'm a nice mayor, vote for me. You know, it's still like, vote for you or else? You know, it's like, oof, okay. But you still have that like underlying emotional stuff going on, especially with his wife, where he's trying to deal with his issues with Vanessa and things like that. I like that because it adds a little extra depth to the character and doesn't just make him, I am evil man. His interactions with his staff is fairly well done. He can be a bit brusque with them, but he's also like, oh, you can be useful to me, and therefore I will treat you just nice enough to ensure that you will help me. Overall, I have basically no complaint about the Kingpin, other than you can kind of tell Vincent D'Onofrio is showing his age. But considering the fact that time is supposed to have passed and obviously Kingpin would have aged, it still works for the character. It's just like, I just look at him and I go, oh, you don't look as young as you used to. Because, you know, time actually happened. Next we have McDuffie. She's there for banter. She doesn't really do anything else in the show. I don't know what the plan is. I think it's just there to have someone for Matt to talk to at the law firm. She does set Matt up on a date, and I am very, very grateful they didn't go with the blind date pun. Maybe the original version did, but thankfully it was either cut or someone was like, oh, we better not do that. That's kind of offensive. Not that I have anything against the phrase blind date. It's making the joke out of a blind date with a blind guy. It's just, you know, just, ugh. McDuffie's kind of an empty shell right now, and I'm hoping to do something with her rather than just being someone for Matt to talk to occasionally. Then we have Cherry. He's Matt's investigator guy. He's pretty good. Yeah, he does the tough guy thing pretty well. His, you know, discussions with Matt about, you know, hey, I know that Daredevil side of you is just itching right now. You know you want to do something, and you got to think twice on this one, buddy. I'm not against you doing it, but you know you're against you doing it. You know? And being there for that kind of conversation is kind of nice. He does a lot more in episode 2, and I really want to see more with Cherry. I think he's kind of an interesting character who we could build a lot into. And his dynamic with Matt is fairly well done, which is good because Matt needs someone he can play off of since Foggy and Karen just disappeared from the show. So, you know, while it was great seeing them in the first 5 minutes of the first episode, they're not around because in the original draft of the story, they weren't in it at all. So getting a small cameo in the beginning is nice, but Matt needs those people to play off of, and thankfully we got at least one thus far. Hopefully the later episodes will kind of adjust that a bit. Last character I want to focus on is Hector. Very interesting guy. His dynamic and the way he was trying to hide his identity as the White Tiger worked pretty well. I'd like to see more with the character. He wasn't around for a lot. We know that he had some issues with his wife, and there's already a push by Mayor Fisk to deal with vigilantes very harshly. No surprise there. Hopefully they build up more on this character because I think there's a lot to do with him, and I'd hate him to just be, he's in like 3 episodes, goes to jail, and we never hear about him again. That would be a waste of a great character. I see potential here with this character, and I'd love to see what they end up doing with him in the show. As for everyone else, no one was really a bad actor or anything like that, but no one was really memorable in any way that mattered, and not enough to warrant a focus on the character That may change in later episodes, but so far, outside of Daniel and BB, who I find to be incredibly annoying, everyone else was generally fine. So that's good. When it comes to the audio, we have fairly decent background music that sounds very similar to the original music used in the original series. It is a little bit different, but it does work very well. It sets that darker, more New York tone of things are dangerous, things are dark, and I like that. I think it really works with the setting and everything, and the background music thus far has been fairly decent. There is a little bit of licensed music in the first 2 episodes, a song near the beginning of the first episode, and both episodes' end credits have a song. I will say this, I am so grateful it is not more super pop hits from the 70s and 80s. I am so sick of seeing that, because usually it doesn't even fit. It's just, I liked that song, so I'll just plop it in there, and it's just please stop. Hearing some songs from the aughts, not too bad. Hopefully they don't overdo it with the licensed music, but it's nice that it's there and that they're choosing more recent stuff than your typical 70s, 80s fare you see in most shows. Lastly, there's the title sequence. The song they use there is very evocative, though it is different. There's some nice little tonal shifts in it, of the Netflix theme, and even the visuals for it also feel like the Netflix one with some new twists and changes in there, but you still have the statues and Lady Justice and stuff like that. So I think they did a good job making it evocative of the older thing, but still being its own thing. So you're not looking at it going like, oh, they just redid the old title sequence. Speaking of the visuals, we have some problems here. First off, you can tell when we're at the old footage and the new footage because the camera work is very different. The lighting is very different. Even the color temperature is different. And this is coming from a visually impaired guy. So I'm assuming anyone who is a bit more visually gifted than myself probably noticed these things. It doesn't ruin the show, but it's like one of those, you can tell stuff's been cut and pasted together, and it's fairly obvious when it happens. Also, as I said, the fight sequences, not great. We get a fight where it's mostly obscured by smoke, and we have 2 other really terribly shot jump cutty fights. And I'm hoping that's not how the whole show goes, because the action was one of the best parts of the original. And when you have a brawler guy like Daredevil and you want to see him getting in those rough and tumble battles, you need to shoot them well, and you need the stunt choreography to be handled properly. And seeing what I saw, I am not impressed. And in fact, I'm actually quite worried we're not going to get particularly good action as this series continues. Lastly, the BB channel cutaways. By the way, every time I see her, all I can think of is BB Channel, which only like 5 people who watch this video will actually get. Sorry, I have to think of my favorite Kohai every once in a while. It reminded me of her, and in its own way, that made it annoy me more just because of the character name similarities. That being said, the cutaways to random New Yorkers just saying random New Yorker stuff, I understand what they're trying to do with it, but I find it to be very annoying because it really screws up the pacing of an episode, and frankly, I don't care what the man on the street is thinking. And there are better ways of doing that than just randomly inserting the stuff into the middle of the episode. I am thoroughly convinced that the BB web show was probably a bigger part of the original series, and I'm sure, as I said earlier, BB and Daniel were a bigger part of the show because they're hyper obnoxious, and in terms of the comedic tone we had been told about, I feel like they would have fallen directly into that Marvel humor pigeonhole of highly annoying characters making flippant jokes about everything. But it's not all bad. When we are in the newly shot stuff, the camera work is fairly well done. You definitely get some moody lighting, and of the way they slow things down and kind of alter the screen a little bit when Matt is using his super hearing to pick up on other things happening around him. There's some really good usage of camera work and like the chases and the moments where you get these nice, great, perspective shots and things like that. So there is some good camera work here and there. It just would be nice if that camera work extended to the fight scenes. Hopefully we get more of the moody style and the better camera work as the series continues. But I get the feeling these first few episodes, since they are supposed to be based off the original footage for the most part, are going to have some of the weaknesses that came with the original director or the original cinematographer or whomever was responsible for making the sloppy action sequences and very flat angles with normal TV lighting that really doesn't fit the darker tone that comes with Daredevil. Overall, both episodes were much better than I expected. Episode 1 had a good start, and it was nice seeing the original team for like 5 minutes. It has a few good moments with some good lighting and good camera work. The script is overall fairly decent. Unfortunately, the fights aren't great. The swapping between the two shows is clearly an issue. We have annoying stuff like the BB show and the romantic comedy segments that really just don't vibe well with the general tone of Daredevil. But that being said, the flaws of this episode don't really ruin it overall, and I found it to be a fairly strong start to the series. My final score for episode 1 is a 4 out of 5. For episode 2, this one does have a few more flaws. Not only do we get a lot more of that flat camera work, we got 2 very below average fight scenes. We have a lot of running in place as we're trying to do yet more setup instead of trying to move the plot along. We have way too many plot lines going on. We have more BB stuff, and we generally really needed more about White Tiger and what's going on with that. However, I think the Fisk stuff in episode 2 is really well done, and there are some nice moments with Matt and Cherry that I quite liked as well. Not a terrible episode, but not as strong as the first one. My final verdict for episode 2 is a 3.5 out of 5. I am surprised at how good this turned out to be. I was really expecting it to be bad, and this was above average, and I do appreciate that. They even tried to throw in a little bit of religious stuff, which I thought Disney was going to cut completely, but you do have a moment of him hearing some people at a church, and a few little moments of making reference to religious allegory in his discussion of Kingpin. Odds are all of this has been added in and wasn't part of the original cut. You can definitely see the flaws in the show right now, but they're not so egregious that it ruins the show. I'm sure most people will have a score higher than mine, unless, like me, they rewatched the Netflix stuff, and then they go into this and they go, ooh, that's a downgrade. Still not terrible. It's an okay action-adventure series that hopefully will get better. And according to the rumors, once you get past about the midway point, about episode 5-ish, is when things really start to amp up and feel like classic Daredevil. So I'm not going to go and say this is the worst thing ever. I'm not going to say it's the best thing ever. I'm going to say currently it's above average. If you haven't had the chance to watch it, give it a watch. I tried to keep a few things still secret, so hopefully I didn't ruin your viewing experience. Let me know in the comments what you thought of these first 2 episodes. Are you planning on watching the rest? And do you agree with me that it doesn't hold up to the Netflix series, but it's not terrible either? Beyond that, please like and subscribe. If you want more Marvel-related content, I reviewed every episode of X-Men 97. But other than that, thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll see you at the tavern.